My husband abandoned me right when my water broke to go save his ex. When he came back in a wheelchair, his family demanded that I save him. I handed him the divorce papers and said a single sentence that left them all pale. At that moment, I was staying in a VIP postpartum suite at a premium maternal care center in downtown Seattle. My C-section incision still ached with a dull, persistent throb. Every time I turned or moved, even a little, the pain harshly reminded me of the exhausting delivery I had endured a week ago. My daughter, Little Hope, was sleeping deeply in the oak crib next to my bed. She was a very good baby. She woke up almost exclusively when she was hungry. The phone on my nightstand was muted, set only to vibrate, but it had been buzzing relentlessly since first thing in the morning. The screen constantly lit up and then went dark again. 15 missed calls from my mother-in-law. 7 missed calls from Hassan Luke's best friend. 4 missed calls from Luke's sister. I stared at those notifications with total indifference. My heart didn't even skip a beat. I was used to their chaotic nature. But then, an unsaved number popped up. I didn't recognize the number, but when it rolled over to a missed call, the voicemail transcription revealed a name that left me paralyzed. Edward. My father. The man who, for the last 10 years, had called me exactly twice, both times on Thanksgiving. Ever since we had a massive blowout over his rushed second marriage, he hadn't initiated a single call in a decade. If even my father was calling, it meant the sky was truly about to fall. I just stared at the screen. The call ended and then it buzzed again. My father. Again. I took a deep breath. I reached for the phone, but I didn't answer, nor did I call back. I held down the power button and selected Power Off. Absolute silence wrapped around the room, save for baby Hope's soft, rhythmic breathing. The door to my suite opened very gently. Katie, my private postpartum nurse, walked in pushing a medical cart. "Hannah, it's time to check your blood pressure and look at the incision," she said. She was young. Her voice was always soothing. She looked at the powered-off phone on the table and observed me with a slight expression of compassionate worry. "Hannah, is there some kind of family emergency? Your phone has been buzzing with missed calls since dawn." I offered her a smile that was probably paler than my own face. I reached out and softly stroked my daughter's cheek. "It's okay, Katie. My most important and urgent priority is right here." The nurse looked at me, her eyes brimming with pity. She probably thought I was an abandoned single mother, or someone running from a deeply dysfunctional family. She was half right. I had been abandoned, but not in the way she imagined. I knew exactly why they were all calling, even my father. That morning, when Katie wheeled me to the lounge area to get some sun, the large TV in the waiting room was broadcasting CNN. Breaking news. According to the latest reports, the situation in a volatile conflict zone in the Middle East had escalated drastically. A group of American contractors and specialists was trapped. Among the names of the missing was Luke Peterson. Luke, my husband. The man whose name was flashing on a missing persons list halfway across the world. People say that when a wife finds out her husband is in danger, she should be devastated. She should cry. She should do everything in her power to help. But when I heard his name, my heart didn't even skip a beat. It was as still as an autumn lake, as cold as that night 3 weeks ago. The night I realized my 7-year marriage was truly over. How could the physical pain of a C-section incision compare to the agony of having the person you loved most stab you in the back, right when you were at your most vulnerable? They could call me ruthless. They could call me cold-blooded. But they didn't know. They would never know what Luke did to me and my daughter, right before getting on a plane headed for that war zone. It all started 3 weeks earlier. I was 39 weeks pregnant. My body felt impossibly heavy. My legs were swollen like tree trunks. Every step was a monumental effort. I was sitting on our familiar sectional sofa in the living room. I was rubbing my belly with my hands, trying to count my baby's little kicks. I was exhausted, but overflowing with the happy anticipation of motherhood. Luke, my husband, was sitting next to me, carefully peeling an apple. He was always meticulous like that. We were watching the evening news. It had been a fixed routine in our house for 7 years. A quiet, small family, a loving husband, a baby on the way. I used to think my life was perfectly complete. Suddenly, the broadcast switched to international news, to a flashpoint in the Middle East, where several American aid workers and journalists were stationed. The anchor's voice turned grave. We have just received word that an independent American war correspondent, Diana Henkins, has been reported missing while covering the conflict zone. Clack! The paring knife in Luke's hand dropped onto the hardwood floor, bouncing against the coffee table leg with a sharp, metallic ping. The half-peeled apple rolled away. I turned to look at him, and I will never forget the expression on his face. He was stunned, his eyes wide open, glued to the TV screen. All the blood had drained from his face, leaving him deathly pale. My stomach tightened with a mild Braxton Hicks contraction. I winced and held my belly. "Honey, what's wrong? Did you drop the knife?" Diana. I knew that name. I had heard it far too many times in my 7 years of marriage. She was Luke's ex-girlfriend, his first great love, a deep relationship that had lasted almost 10 years, through college and beyond. I used to hear my mother-in-law Barbara sigh every time she saw me cook. Diana was so ambitious, she travels the world doing such important things. I also heard Luke's buddies pat him on the back during drunken barbecues and whisper, "Luke still misses Diana." If only she hadn't chosen her career overseas. She was a brilliant, beautiful, fearless war correspondent. And me? I was just a regular corporate accountant who agreed to take a step back, manage the house, and get ready to have a baby. Luke jumped hastily, bending down to pick up the knife. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "No, it's nothing. I have to take a call in my office. A client has an emergency." He was lying. I knew he was lying. His voice was shaking. He practically sprinted down the hallway to his study and slammed the door. I even heard the distinct click of the deadbolt locking from the inside. It was completely abnormal behavior. He hadn't done anything like that in 7 years. I was left alone in the living room. The half-peeled apple on the table started to oxidize and turn brown. I couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but I could feel the frantic, terrified urgency of his muffled voice bleeding through the door. I heard his heavy, rapid footsteps pacing back and forth. My belly gave me another sharp twinge. I rubbed it, trying to soothe my baby and calm myself down. It's probably nothing, I thought. Just an old friend in trouble. It's normal for him to be worried. But a woman's intuition, especially that of a woman about to cross the threshold of childbirth, is never wrong. I didn't know that the study door he had just locked was also the door shutting out the future of the family I had worked so hard to build. An hour passed. I remained motionless on the couch. The apple on the table had turned a dark brown, as if it were bruised, exactly like my spirit. By then, my abdomen was hardening into rigid, intense contractions, but I didn't have the mental capacity to time them. My eyes were locked on the study door. Finally, the door opened. Luke walked out, but he wasn't carrying a glass of water. He was carrying his wheeled carry-on suitcase, the one he used for short business trips. My heart sank into my stomach. Where are you going?" I forced the words out with a broken voice. Luke refused to meet my gaze. He looked at the window, the floor, anything but his wife's pale face. "I have an emergency trip to Portland. It's urgent. I have to leave tonight." A clumsy, pathetic lie. A trip to Portland. Why had he needed to lock himself in a room for an hour? A trip to Portland. Why did he look as terrified and haunted as a man going to war? I struggled to stand up. My 39-week belly made me move like a clumsy bear. I stumbled to the entryway and blocked the front door. "I'm about to give birth. The doctor said it could be any day. I'm 39 weeks. "Luke, where are you going right now? It's really important." "I have to go," he blurted out, his voice thick with impatience. He reached out and gently pushed me aside. "I promise I'll be back before you deliver. Move." It was at that exact moment, the very second his hand shoved me, that a sudden rush of hot liquid poured out of me. It wasn't a trickle. It was an uncontrollable flood that soaked my maternity dress, ran down my legs, and formed a puddle on the hardwood floor. I froze. Pure, absolute terror seized me. I grabbed Luke's arm, digging my nails into his skin. "Luke, my water just broke. It broke. Don't go, please. I'm begging you. Don't leave me." I started sobbing hysterically. The fear I had repressed for 9 months exploded. "You forgot about my mother. Did you forget the story I told you? My mom died on the delivery table, trying to give birth to my brother. I'm terrified. Stay home with me. Don't leave me alone." That was the darkest trauma of my life. I was panicked about giving birth, panicked about hospitals, panicked about facing death alone. Luke knew that better than anyone in the world. He hesitated. He looked at the pool of amniotic fluid spreading across the floor. He looked at my terrified, tear-streaked face, and then he looked at his watch. Just one glance. A single glance at the time. While his wife's water was breaking, and she was begging for her life, that simple glance killed every last shred of love I had left for him. Slowly and decisively, he peeled my fingers off his arm, one by one. My sobbing stopped dead, as if someone had flipped a switch. The tears kept falling, but I was no longer gasping. Then I understood. I finally understood. I took a step back, clearing the path to the door. "Go," I said. My voice sounded chillingly calm. It even surprised me. "But remember this. If you walk out that door today, you will carry all the consequences for our daughter and for yourself." He hastily grabbed the suitcase and lunged for the door. In his panic, he had even forgotten his passport and wallet on the entryway console. "Wait," I said. He froze at the door, realizing what he had forgotten. I dragged my heavy body to the bedroom, amniotic fluid still dripping. I opened his nightstand drawer, grabbed his passport, and next to it, a debit card. It was the card where he had stashed his entire salary for the last 7 years. I worked as an accountant. My paycheck covered our daily expenses, so I rarely touched his money. There was about $40,000 on it, money I planned to use for our daughter's future. I walked back to the living room with both items in my hand. I didn't hand them to him. I threw them hard against his chest. "Here, go save your woman. You're going to need money and this to fly." Luke flinched and caught them. He looked at me, a flash of guilt crossing his eyes, but it vanished instantly. He shoved them into his jacket pocket without saying a single word. Slam! The door closed, and the sound echoed through the cold, empty apartment. I stood there in a puddle of my own amniotic fluid. I stared at the closed door for a long time. Then I slowly slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. I felt completely drained, but my hands weren't shaking. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call my mother-in-law, nor did I call my friends. I calmly dialed 911. Hello, is this emergency services? My water broke. Please send help. I paused for a second before adding, I am home alone. The ride to the hospital felt endless. I was lying on the ambulance stretcher, sirens wailing, cutting through the night. And yet, my world was terrifyingly silent. The contractions were coming fast and hard, each one more painful than the last. The paramedics kept asking me, keep taking deep breaths. Where is your husband? Where is your family? Call them to meet us at the hospital right now. I just shook my head as tears filled my eyes again. I bit my lip hard. I am alone. Please hurry. I thought of my mother. I never really knew her. I only knew her from black and white photographs, a woman with sad eyes. My father had told me that the day she died, she was also alone in the delivery room, pushing until she had no strength left to give birth to my brother. My father was out in the hallway with his parents praying for a son. When the doctor came out to announce that my mother hadn't survived, my grandparents only cared about holding their grandson, and my father didn't even go in to see his wife's face one last time. Men. Maybe they were all the same. They always had more important priorities than the lives of the women facing death for them. Arriving at the hospital was a blur, like a fast-forwarded movie, chaotic and terrifying. They rushed me straight into the ER. Hurry, where's the patient's family? Nobody. The patient has premature rupture of membranes. Fetal distress detected. We have to do an emergency C-section. A young nurse pressed a clipboard and a pen into my hand. She spoke incredibly fast, right as I was writhing under a massive contraction. Ma'am, you need to sign this emergency surgical consent. We can't operate without your signature. I was shaking. My vision was blurred with tears. I couldn't read a single word. I was signing a life or death contract for myself. Even in that moment, the man I called my husband wasn't there. Where was he? Probably already 30,000 feet in the air, flying toward a woman whose life mattered more than his wife's and his daughter's. The operating room was freezing, the surgical lights blinding. I heard the sharp metallic clink of instruments. I heard the doctors discussing the procedure. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let out a pathetic whimper. Other women had husbands holding their hands, mothers stroking their hair. I only had myself to fight, for 2 lives on that cold operating table. Self-pity, agony, and despair rose in my throat. Hang in there. Take a deep breath. Almost done. The doctor's voice echoed. And then, wah, wah. The cry pierced the terrifying silence of the OR. It was clear and loud. It's a girl. 7 pounds, absolutely beautiful, the doctor celebrated. In that exact second, I broke down crying in loud, uncontrollable sobs. I cried like I had never cried before. Not from the pain, but from pure relief. My baby, my daughter, was safe. They wrapped her in a soft blanket and brought her close to my cheek. Her warmth, the sweet smell of a newborn. I turned my head and kissed her forehead. Hello, baby, I whispered. Hope. Your name is Hope. I'm going to call you Hope. I named her right there. Not the elegant name Luke and I had picked out together, but Hope. Because I understood that the only thing I needed in that moment and for the rest of my life was something to hold on to. I didn't need anything else. Just her. Back in the present, I had just finished carefully changing Hope's diaper. She looked comfortable. She let out a long yawn and drifted back to sleep. The incision still stung, but looking at her soothed all my pain. I whispered to her tenderly, "Be good, Hope. Sleep tight. Mommy loves you." Bang! The door to my suite flew open with explosive force. No knocking, no warning. The impact was so violent that the door slammed against the wall with a deafening crash. I jumped and hastily covered my baby with the blanket. Hope, ripped from her sleep by the loud noise, flinched in terror and started screaming at the top of her lungs. Barbara, my mother-in-law, stormed into the room. Her hair was a mess, her silk blouse wrinkled, her face flushed with rage, and probably from running. She had completely lost the serene, aristocratic bearing of a wealthy matriarch. But what chilled my blood was that she ran in without even glancing at the crib. She didn't care if her newborn grandchild was a boy or a girl. She didn't care if the baby was crying or sleeping. She marched straight up to my bed, practically shoving her index finger into my face. "Hannah, are you even human?" she shrieked, her voice drowning out Hope's cries. I was stunned. I quickly picked up my baby, pressed her against my chest, and patted her tiny, trembling back. "Barbara, how did you get in here? You scared the baby." Barbara acted like she couldn't hear her granddaughter crying. She acted like she couldn't hear me. Her eyes were bloodshot, glaring at me with hatred, as if I had murdered her parents. She screamed in a high-pitched voice, "You're worried your daughter got scared. What about my son? Where is your husband?" "My son is trapped in a war zone. He's going to die. Do you understand?" She stomped her foot. "And you're sitting here. You turn off your phone. You play deaf and dumb with this entire family. Are you even the daughter-in-law of this house?" I stared at the unhinged woman in front of me. Her son was dying. And my daughter. My daughter was born without her father by her side. Who caused all this? I tried to maintain my composure. Holding my baby with one arm, I pointed to the door with the other. "Barbara, lower your voice." The baby was sleeping. "Whatever this is, take it out to the hallway. This is a hospital." "A hospital." She scoffed with an ugly, twisted sneer. "Oh, you know this is a hospital. You know how to be scared. Let me tell you something. Don't play innocent. You're throwing me out. I'm not going anywhere. You need to give me answers. I'm not leaving." She was shaking with fury. Ignoring Hope's escalating cries, she took another step forward and aggressively pulled her phone out of her purse. She practically shoved the glowing screen into my face. "Look at it. Open your eyes and look at what your husband just sent us." I squinted at the screen while rocking Hope, who was still screaming. I forced myself to read the message. It was a text Luke had just sent to the family group chat, a chat Barbara had kicked me out of months ago, after we argued because she demanded I quit my job in the first trimester. Barbara's hand was shaking violently, not because the phone was heavy, but from pure panic. The message was typed in desperation, no punctuation, full of typos, but I could read it. "Mom, Dad, help me. I got shot in the leg. Bullet is in the bone. Hiding in a basement. No meds. Bleeding a lot. Save me." After forcing me to read it, Barbara could no longer hold back. She broke down into hysterical sobs that echoed through the quiet maternity ward. "He's been shot, do you see? If anything happens to my boy, I won't survive it." Her crying mixed with Hope's screams, creating a chaotic, deafening cacophony. Then, she suddenly snapped her head up. Her tears stopped, replaced by a terrifying, desperate determination. She grabbed my arm, digging her manicured nails into my skin, causing a sharp pain. "Hannah, I know you have money. That card with $40,000 Luke gave you to hold on to? You still have it, right? You haven't spent it, right?" She stared at me intensely. "And your father. I heard he's a top executive. He has political connections. Call him. Call the embassy. Use your money. Use your father's connections. Get him out of there. You're his wife. You have to save him. Do you hear me? I looked at Barbara. Then I looked down at Luke's desperate plea for help. He had been shot in the leg. He was bleeding. He was terrified, begging to be rescued. Yes, I was his wife. By normal standards, I should be the most desperate, the most shattered, ready to move heaven and earth to save him. But why? Looking at that message, did my heart feel absolutely nothing? I just felt tired, bone deep exhausted. 3 weeks ago, when my water broke, when I begged him on my knees, when I told him I was panicked about dying, what did he choose? He chose to look at his watch and push my hand away. Now he was in danger because he had flown into a war zone to save another woman, and his mother was demanding that I save him. Hope started rooting at my chest. She was hungry. She needed to nurse. That was my most important priority right now. I gently pushed Barbara's claw-like grip off my arm. I looked her dead in the eye with a chillingly calm voice. Barbara, he made his choice. My words rang out clear and ice-cold, cutting right through my mother-in-law's hysterical sobs. Barbara, he made his choice. Barbara froze. She stared at me with wide eyes as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. The anguished grief on her face was instantly replaced by absolute, overwhelming fury. What? What did you just say? She hissed, her voice sharp as a razor. You dare say my son chose this? He is your husband. He went away for work and got caught in a crossfire, and you speak to me with such disrespect, you heartless bitch. Hope was getting more and more restless, picking up on that toxic energy. I was exhausted. My incision was burning again. I truly did not want to argue right then. Not in a hospital room. Not in front of my newborn daughter. Barbara, I'm exhausted. I gently patted my baby's back. Go home and talk to George. I need to rest. My baby needs quiet. Rest. Barbara let out a bitter, cruel laugh. I knew it, you useless, ungrateful wife. Your husband is out there dying, and you're lying in a VIP suite, living like a queen, and hugging your daughter. You're cold-blooded. Luke must have been blind to marry you. She unleashed an avalanche of venomous insults I hadn't heard from her in the 7 years I'd known her. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had planned to stay quiet, but she didn't deserve my silence. I carefully laid Hope back in the crib. She was still crying, but I knew I had to end this immediately. I reached for my iPad on the nightstand. I never intended to use this. I had installed a security camera near the entryway of our apartment months ago, mostly to prevent package thefts and feel safe when I was home alone. I never imagined it would capture the cruelest moment of my marriage. I opened the cloud storage app. I didn't have to search long. It was the last video recorded that fateful night 3 weeks ago. I placed the iPad on the overbed table and turned the screen toward Barbara. Watch this, I said calmly. Watch how your precious golden boy made his choice before you call me cold. Barbara narrowed her eyes as the video started playing. The screen clearly showed the living room in the front door. Then I came into frame, my face contorted in pain. Luke walked out with his suitcase. Then came the audio. My desperate voice echoed from the iPad. I'm about to give birth. Where are you going right now? And then the exact moment. The screen clearly captured how I flinched and how a massive amount of liquid poured down my legs, forming a puddle on the floor. Then my hysterical pleading. Luke, my water just broke. Please don't go. I'm scared. My mom. I'm terrified of dying. My mother-in-law froze. She brought her hand to her mouth, but the video kept playing. It showed Luke looking at the amniotic fluid on the floor, then looking at his watch. It captured how he decisively peeled my clinging fingers off his arm. It showed me falling to the floor, grabbing his leg, and how he pulled away, grabbed his suitcase, and slammed the door shut. The video ended with me, alone, sliding down the wall, sitting in a pool of amniotic fluid, staring blankly at the door. The hospital room fell into a deathly silence. Hope's crying had dialed down to soft whimpers. My mother-in-law was rooted to the spot. Her face went from a furious burning red to a ghostly white. She was shaking. She took a step back, then another, as if she had just seen a ghost. She couldn't believe her perfect, devoted son could do something so monstrous. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice cold as ice. Now you see it. While I was facing death to bring his daughter into the world, he chose to walk away. He chose to fly across the world to save his ex-girlfriend. He abandoned his own daughter before she even took her first breath. Tell me, Barbara, who is the cold-blooded one here? I paused for a second before delivering the final blow. Oh, and that $40,000 you were asking about? I gave it to him before he left. I gave it to him so he could bribe his way through a war zone and save Diana. Isn't your son incredible? Barbara's jaw dropped, but no sound came out of her mouth. She turned around, stumbled out of the room, crashed into the medical cart, and fled as if running for her life, completely forgetting her designer purse on the chair. The room instantly regained its calm, leaving only Hope's soft hiccups. I picked her up and rocked her. Her warmth seeped into me, but my heart remained frozen. Normally, seeing my arrogant mother-in-law flee in shame should have made me feel vindicated. But no, I only felt a bottomless sadness. Why had Luke been so cruel? He didn't just betray me. He destroyed the perfect image he had meticulously built for the mother who considered him her sole pride. He forced two women, his wife and his mother, to face off in an arena. But I couldn't afford to be weak. I couldn't sit there nursing my pain. Luke made his choice. Barbara showed me exactly whose side she was on. Now it was time for me to make mine. I had to protect my daughter, and I had to protect my assets. I laid Hope back in the crib. She was finally falling asleep. I picked up my phone and pulled up my father-in-law's number. George. In 7 years, I had barely ever spoken directly to him, because Barbara ruled that house with an iron fist. I hit call. It rang for a long time before he answered. Hello? George's voice was hoarse and exhausted. He was probably desperately trying to figure out how to save Luke. George, it's Hannah, I said. He sounded surprised. Did your mother-in-law call you? Why weren't you answering? How is Luke? Did you find a way to help him yet? Your father has connections. I cut him off. I had absolutely zero patience for this. George, I'm calling to inform you of 2 things. Dead silence on the other end. My tone had probably stunned him. I continued in a flat voice. First, my baby was born. It's a girl. We are both healthy, and I'm recovering at a care center. Oh, okay, he replied dryly. Not a single question about his granddaughter's name. Not a single question about whether it was a C-section or a natural birth, or if I was okay. That apathy turned my heart to stone. So about the second thing, did you call the embassy, or should I? The second thing, I interrupted him again. The luxury downtown Seattle condo where you and Barbara are living. I bought that property outright with my inheritance before marrying Luke. It's solely in my name. Silence. I could hear his heavy breathing. "I've made a decision. I'm selling the condo," I said clearly. "I need you and Barbara to pack your things and move out before the end of this week. I need the money." "You," he roared. "You wouldn't dare. You're crazy. Your husband's life is hanging by a thread out there, and you're talking about selling the house and throwing your in-laws out on the street? What kind of monster are you?" His curses echoed through the phone, but I felt no fear. "George," I replied calmly, "that house is mine. Luke chose to abandon me while my water was breaking to go play hero for his ex. No one in this family respects us, neither me nor my daughter." When Barbara burst in here, she just screamed at me. She didn't even look at her granddaughter once. "Why the hell should I let you live in my house? You. I need the money to raise my daughter. Luke is gone. I have to manage on my own. You two can find your own retirement housing, or better yet, go ask Diana's family for help. Who knows? If she saves Luke, maybe you can all go back to being one big happy family." I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up. My hands were shaking. It was the first time in my life I had done something so ruthless and disrespectful to my elders. But looking at my sleeping daughter, I knew I had no regrets. If I didn't protect us, no one else would. I knew this would reach my father's ears immediately. After a blow like that, Barbara and George would undoubtedly call Edward to complain. And I knew my father. He would never take my side. Like them, he lived for one thing, only appearances. I was right. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. Edward. This time, I didn't turn it off. I took a deep breath, I braced myself, and swiped to answer. "Hannah, come home right now." There was no hello, there was no how are you. The very first words from my own father, a week after my C-section, were an order. He barked at me over the phone like I was a fugitive. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, I'm at the postpartum center. I just had major surgery last week." "You forgot." "Don't give me excuses," he bellowed. He always had that booming, authoritative voice. "What the hell are you doing? You kicked your in-laws out of their house. You declared a divorce while your husband is missing. Are you even human? Do you still consider me your father?" I stayed silent. My incision throbbed. "You embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of the Carter family," he yelled through the receiver. "George and Barbara just called me. They were crying. They cursed me for not raising you right. They said my daughter is a cold-blooded, ungrateful snake. How am I supposed to show my face at the club now? It's a curse having a daughter like you." Embarrassed. I whispered the word to myself. It was always about being embarrassed. His whole life revolved around his image. He didn't care what his daughter had been through. He didn't care about his new granddaughter. He only cared about the country club gossip. "Dad." My voice sounded exhausted. "You called just to yell at me because you're embarrassed. You didn't ask how your granddaughter is doing. You didn't ask if I was in pain, lying alone on an operating table." For a split second, I had hoped that after all these years, maybe he had changed. His response destroyed it all. "Pain." "What pain?" he snapped. "Women give birth all the time. You pop out a kid and suddenly you want a medal? Don't be weak like your mother." That phrase, weak like your mother. It struck the deepest, most painful and resentful wound in my soul. A wound I had buried for 20 years. I laughed. A dry, chilling laugh echoed in the quiet hospital room. I laughed at my own stupidity. I laughed because I was a 30-year-old woman who had just survived childbirth. Still expected a shred of love from this man. My sudden laughter made my father pause. His rage faltered. What? What are you laughing at? Are you crazy? I'm laughing, Dad. I'm laughing because you are exactly like George and exactly like Luke. You men are all the same. What nonsense are you spouting? He snapped, bewildered. You said I'm weak like my mother. My voice started to shake. Not from fear, but from raw, absolute fury. You're right. Mom was weak. She was weak because she listened to you. Even though the doctors strictly forbade her from getting pregnant again, she did it anyway. Just because you demanded a son just so you could show off in front of your friends. Because my mother was weak, I screamed, unleashing 20 years of buried trauma, she died on that table. 2 lives lost at once. Do you remember? I was 10 years old. Did you ever feel sorry for her? Did you ever feel a single ounce of guilt for pushing her into that? Absolute silence on the line. The silence was more terrifying than the shouting. It was a confession. I answered for him. You didn't. You were only embarrassed that your wife died without giving you an heir. You were so worried about what people would say that before the anniversary of her death, you had already married your new wife. You got your son, you got your status, you were satisfied, and you let your daughter live like a ghost in her own house. Tears streamed down my face, soaking Hope's swaddle. She stirred, opening her clear, dark eyes, looking at me as if she were listening. I quickly wiped my tears and kissed her forehead. I returned to the phone, my voice calmer, but completely devoid of warmth. You're right, Dad. You understand men better than anyone. You have no empathy for my mother, none for me, but you definitely understand Luke. My husband is just like you. He needed his ego stroked. He couldn't let people say he abandoned his brave ex-girlfriend. He couldn't let his true love be alone in danger. So he chose to leave his wife while her water broke. He abandoned his unborn daughter and flew off to be a hero. He's an incredible, responsible man. Dad, exactly like you. You, my father stammered, unable to form a sentence. So don't ever call me again, I said, handing down my final verdict. I'm not like my mother. I'm not weak. I'm not going to die for a man who doesn't deserve it. Whoever abandons me gets left behind. Whoever hurts me will not be forgiven. I will raise my daughter alone. I will keep my own house. If you're embarrassed, deal with it yourself. I hung up, tossing the phone aside without caring if it broke. I hugged my tiny daughter tightly. My body was still trembling, but inside I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a decades-old weight had been lifted off my chest. Hope, I whispered. From now on, it's just you and me. Mommy promises she will never be weak. I will protect you. I looked out the window. The Seattle sky was gray as always. I knew my war was just beginning. I had to sell the condo. I had to finalize the divorce, and I had to find out exactly why Luke took that $40,000. His relationship with Diana wasn't just two old flames. After that explosive call with my father, my hands were still shaking. I held Hope, feeling deeply guilty. She was only a few days old. She didn't deserve to be surrounded by the screaming and toxic hatred of adults. I kissed her head. Good girl. It's okay. Mommy is here. I'm sorry. I thought cutting ties with my in-laws and my father would buy me some peace. I was wrong. The phone I had just tossed aside lit up again. This time, it wasn't calls. It was a rapid-fire barrage of notifications and messages. WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, They rained down like hail on my fragile peace. Kevin, Luke's friend Hannah. What is wrong with you? Answer the phone. Hassan, Luke's coworker Hannah. Any news on Luke? The whole office is panicking. The barbecue buddy group chat. You're his wife. You need to step up and handle this. Why are you disappearing? Everyone is freaking out. I read every message with my lips pressed into a thin line. They were worried. They were blaming me. They were telling me to step up. Just like Barbara, just like my father. Not a single one asked, "Are you in pain from the C-section?" Not one asked how the baby was doing. To them, it was natural to expect a woman recovering from major surgery to abandon her newborn to become the savior of a man who had deliberately abandoned her. Hope startled when the phone chimed again, whimpering on the verge of crying. My anger flared. Enough! I couldn't let anyone bother my daughter anymore. I opened my contacts, selected every single person who had just texted me, all of Luke's friends, and his overly friendly female coworkers. I drafted a single, clear message. I gave no explanations, no sob stories. I owed them nothing. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your concern. I am currently busy caring for my newborn and recovering from surgery. Please direct all questions regarding Luke to his parents George and Barbara Carter. Do not call or text me anymore. There is nothing I can do. Furthermore, Luke and I will be proceeding with a divorce as soon as he returns. Thank you. I hit send to all. Instantly, my phone went dead silent. The sudden calm after the storm felt heavy. I knew that message would trigger a massive earthquake in Luke's social circle. What would they call me? A snake? Heartless? I didn't care. The only thing that mattered to me was the sound of my daughter's breathing. I muted every single notification. I needed silence. But that silence wasn't for resting, it was for planning. I had to act. I had to sell that condo. And I had to find out exactly where that debit card with $40,000 went. I needed a professional, someone with a cold, calculating mind to represent me. I remembered Valerie, a notoriously ruthless family and divorce attorney a friend had recommended years ago. She was known for being highly analytical and for fiercely defending women. I found her number in my contacts. I took a deep breath and dialed. Valerie Law Group, how can I help you? A receptionist answered. I need to speak with Valerie, I said. My name is Hannah. It's an urgent matrimonial matter. Minutes later, Valerie's voice came on the line, warm but strictly professional. Hi, Hannah. I'm here. I didn't cry. I was brief and clinical. I just had an emergency C-section. My husband abandoned me while my water broke to fly to a foreign country. I want a divorce. I want to immediately liquidate a premarital real estate asset. And I have serious suspicions about our finances. Valerie listened in silence. Her silence made me trust her. When I finished, she asked a single, incisive question. Are you absolutely sure? Or is this postpartum hormones and anger talking? Valerie, I said with a surprisingly calm voice. I was sure. The night I was alone on an operating table, signing my own surgical consent. I'm not angry. I'm doing what's best for my daughter. Understood, Valerie said without hesitation. What exactly do you need me to do? I looked at Hope. First, I urgently need to sell a luxury downtown condo that is solely in my name. My in-laws live there, and I've already given them notice to vacate. Handle the listing and the legalities for me as fast as humanly possible. Second, draft a contested divorce petition. Grounds abandonment during a medical emergency and severe emotional distress. I want full custody. I waive alimony and child support. Third, I hesitated. This was the biggest question mark. I need you to investigate his finances. Before he left, I threw a debit card at him. It contained about $40,000 of his income that I had saved up. I want to know where that money went. He used it to fund a ransom for Diana. Furthermore, I want you to subpoena all his bank records for the full 7 years of our marriage. We kept our finances mostly separate. I want to know where the rest of his money went. Valerie paused. I heard her typing. I understand. Getting full discovery on his accounts before filing the petition requires some legal maneuvering, but since it affects the division of marital assets, I can get it done. Send me his social security number and his basic info. I'll have my forensic accountant start immediately. I sent her the information and hung up. I let out a sigh of relief. I had finally taken the first step. Maybe it was clean. Maybe the rest of his money was sitting in a Vanguard index fund. But my intuition, the intuition of an abandoned wife, told me the truth behind his finances was going to be horrifying. A few days later, my incision was healing well. Hope had already settled into a routine. The silence from my family and my in-laws was absolute. They were probably too busy doing damage control after the PR nightmare I had caused them. That morning, as I held Hope by the window, my phone buzzed. It was Valerie. "Hannah, I have the financial reports." Her tone was dead serious. "I think we need to meet in person. I'm at the coffee shop downstairs in the lobby of your care center. Can you come down?" My heart pounded. In person. If it were just normal bank statements, she would have emailed me a PDF. A meeting meant it was bad. "I'll be right down." I asked Katie to watch Hope for 15 minutes and threw on a cardigan. The coffee shop was empty. Valerie was sitting at a corner table with a thick manila folder in front of her. She looked troubled. I sat down. "What's wrong?" She didn't speak. She just slid the folder toward me. "Look at this. This is the statement for the $40,000 card you gave him." I opened it with shaking hands. It was crystal clear. The entire $40,000 had been withdrawn via cashier's check and cash at an airport bank branch 45 minutes before an international flight. "So it's true," I muttered. "He literally took the money to go save her." Valerie shook her head, and that gesture made my blood run cold. "That's just the tip of the iceberg. Look at the next section." She flipped to a thick stack of stapled papers. This is what my investigator found. It took a lot of digging to uncover because he was funneling it through an LLC. "What is this account?" I asked, confused. I only knew about his main checking account. "It's a secondary account in his name, a slush fund," Valerie said, her voice hard, "and it's existed in parallel throughout your entire 7-year marriage." I stared at the pages. My vision blurred. Every month, like clockwork, right after payday, a massive sum, sometimes $1,500, sometimes $2,000, sometimes $3,000, was transferred into that secret account. And almost immediately, the money was wired out. All to a single recipient for 7 years. The Global Remote Children's Charity. I read the name out loud. I looked at Valerie, feeling the color drain from my face. What does this mean? He was secretly donating to a charity. I couldn't believe it. A man who split the grocery bill with me down to the last cent was a secret philanthropist. "Look at the total on the last page," Valerie said softly. I flipped to the end. I stared at the bold number at the bottom of the page. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was hallucinating. In 7 years, while living a modern 50-50 lifestyle with me, while letting me pay out of pocket for my prenatal vitamins and baby supplies, he had secretly siphoned $150,000 to a charity. "I don't think it's a real charity," Valerie said, snapping me back to reality. Does the name ring a bell? I shook my head. I had never heard of it. Valerie sighed and slid her iPad across the table to me. I looked it up for you. Look. My hands were freezing and sweaty at the same time. I had a horrible sinking feeling. The website looked professional enough. Smiling kids in developing countries. Global Remote Children's Charity. I scrolled down to the About Us, Our Team section. My heart stopped. I stopped breathing. There, under the title of Founder and CEO, was a portrait. A woman with edgy, short hair, tanned with a confident smile, standing in a desert landscape surrounded by children. Below the photo, Diana Henkins, founder and CEO. Diana, his ex. The war correspondent he had abandoned me for to go save. Valerie. I choked on the words. I felt my throat closing up. Yes, Valerie nodded sympathetically. Throughout your entire marriage, your husband has been secretly funding his ex-girlfriend's charity to the tune of $150,000. That's almost 4 times the emergency fund you gave him. I sat completely paralyzed. All the puzzle pieces violently slammed together, forming a picture so cruel I could barely look at it. So that was our supposed modern equal marriage, where we respected each other's financial independence. It was an elaborate, sophisticated scam. He split the bills with his wife so he could funnel his disposable income to his ex. The pure agony on his face when he saw the news wasn't just because an old friend was in danger. It was because the woman he truly loved and the project he had bankrolled for 7 years were in danger. The 40 grand I threw at him was just pocket money for the trip. The real investment was the 150 grand he'd been draining for years. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of me building a home. I felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. I was sitting there, recovering from a surgical birth, struggling with milk ducts, terrified for my daughter's future. And my husband had used our marital assets to build another woman's brilliant career and legacy. Charity. I let out a bitter, acidic laugh. Who knows how much of that 150 grand actually bought books for kids and how much ended up in her pockets? That is exactly what I am investigating, Valerie said, with a razor-sharp tone. A charity where the only major source of funding is a secret benefactor who has an intimate history with the director. It reeks of fraud all over. Hannah, this is no longer just a divorce for abandonment. This is dissipation of marital assets. She leaned toward me. And it gets worse. It gets worse. What could be worse than funding his ex with 150 grand? I dug into the LLC, Valerie continued. The organization is registered as a 501c3. Yes, but in practice, it's basically a shell company. Very little actual operational activity. Then where did the money go? My voice cracked. Valerie lowered her voice. It bounced around in a few different ways and ultimately funneled into a single private account. Look at the name. She circled a name on the paper. Patricia Henkins. I frowned. Who is she? The mother. Diana's mother. The bomb dropped. 7 years. All his savings sent to his ex's mother. And do you know what that money was used for? Valerie twisted the knife deeper. Exactly 3 years ago, Patricia Henkins made a massive real estate transaction. That money, plus a little extra, was used as a huge down payment for a luxury condo in Miami. That condo is currently deeded solely in Patricia Henkins' name. 3 years ago, I remembered. That was when I suffered the miscarriage of our first pregnancy. I was lying in a hospital bed, physically and mentally destroyed. Luke was there, holding my hand, playing the devastated husband, telling me we would try again. And right at that moment, he was finalizing the wire transfer of our marital funds to buy a luxury beachfront condo for his ex-girlfriend's mother. I couldn't even cry. I had no tears left. Inside my chest, there was only pure disgust. Disgust for the man I had loved. Disgust for the heroic war correspondent. Disgust for my own blind trust. Valerie. My voice sounded bone dry. I want to sue for embezzlement, fraud, dissipation of assets. I'm going to sue them into the ground. Good, Valerie nodded. That's why I need you to stay ice cold. We're getting it all back. The Seattle condo is yours, but we are going after the $150,000 and putting a lien on that Miami property. It's marital property. It belongs to you and your daughter. I went back to my room with my head spinning. The evidence was overwhelming. For the next few days, I just held hope. I looked at her and cried, not out of weakness, but out of a fierce, protective love. My baby had been born deprived of the future she deserved because of her own father. My time at the postpartum center came to an end. I had already organized everything. George and Barbara had vacated the Seattle condo without a fight, probably too ashamed after the video. Valerie took care of putting it on the market, and the money was already in escrow. I hired Maria, a warm, experienced nanny, to help me with Hope. We moved into a modest, cozy apartment I rented. It was small, but it was safe, and it was just the three of us. I was putting away Hope's clothes when my new phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but thinking it might be a real estate agent, I answered. Hello? Silence. Then a hoarse, exhausted voice. Hannah. Barbara. I froze. It wasn't the shrieking banshee from the hospital. It was the voice of a broken, defeated old woman. What do you want? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Hannah, she started to sob, a pathetic wail. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I lost my mind that day. Please save Luke. Save my son. I said nothing. My heart didn't waver. He called, she blurted out between sobs. It's a bloodbath over there. He's trapped. His leg is severely infected. He has a massive fever. Hannah, please. George and I sold our house. We sold it for a loss. We maxed out our credit cards. We borrowed money from everyone we know. We scraped together $100,000 to pay a private security firm for a medical extraction on a charter flight. He's coming back tonight. But we're drowning in debt. We've lost everything. She cried even harder. I know you're angry, but he's your husband. Please, cancel the divorce. Let's go back to how we were. We can pay off this $100,000 debt together. I'm begging you. I listened to her. $100,000. They had sold their house and ruined themselves to save their precious son. I understood a mother's love. But what about me and my daughter? They went bankrupt for $100,000 to save him. Meanwhile, he quietly handed over $150,000 to his ex to buy a condo in Miami. It was dark, hilariously pathetic. I took a deep breath. Hope stirred on the bed. Barbara, I said calmly, I have to feed my baby. I hung up. I didn't want to hear another word. You pay your own debts. You live the life you chose. The day I left the postpartum center was the day I cut all ties with my past. But later that week, Valerie called. Hannah, the medical charter flight lands tonight at SeaTac at 8 p.m. Are you going? I froze. The airport. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was pale, exhausted, my hair pulled up in a messy bun, and my sweatpants smelled like breast milk. I wanted to say no, that I never wanted to see him again. But then I thought about the 150 grand, the condo in Miami, my daughter. If I didn't show my face, they'd think I was weak. They would never return what belonged to Hope. Yes, I said decisively. I'm going. I'm ending this tonight. I knew you would, Valerie said. Keep your emotions in check. You're going to assert your rights, not reconcile. I'll be on standby. I told Maria I had an important errand and would be back late. I opened my closet. I didn't pick something dark and mournful. I pulled out a tailored sheath dress. The most expensive piece of clothing I owned, bought with my first big bonus. The dress I wore on our 5th anniversary. I sat at my vanity for the first time since giving birth. I did my makeup. I covered the dark circles, added blush, and painted my lips a sharp red. I wasn't going there to cry. I was going as a wife to make everything crystal clear before burning the bridge to ashes. The incision gave me a twinge as I put on my heels, but I didn't care. Physical pain was nothing compared to my shattered heart. I grabbed the manila folder Valerie had prepared, the divorce petition, signed by me, and the forensic accounting report for the 150 grand, along with the deed to the Miami condo. I shoved them into my designer bag. I kissed a sleeping Hope. Wait for Mommy. I'm going to get justice for us. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was loud and chaotic. But the private international arrivals terminal had a tense, compressed atmosphere. I spotted them immediately. Barbara and George were at the front of the barrier, their eyes glued to the glass doors. Barbara looked like she had aged 10 years. Her normally perfect hair was a frizzy mess. Her face was gaunt. George looked furious, pacing back and forth. Behind them was a large group of Luke's friends, Kevin Hassan, the guys who had harassed me via text. When I approached, the whispers stopped. A dozen pairs of eyes locked onto me. They didn't look at me like a relieved wife. They looked at me with curiosity, judgment, and contempt. Barbara saw me, made a face of disgust, and turned away. George glared at me and let out a loud scoff. If looks could kill, I would have died 100 times. I heard a woman whisper, "There she is. Her husband is dying overseas, and she's at home, selling his house and asking for a divorce. And now, she shows up fully glammed out. Shameless." I heard it all. I ignored it all. I stood off to the side with my arms crossed, waiting in silence. I was just a spectator to their grand reunion. Ding! The glass doors slid open. The crowd surged forward all at once. And then, there he was. I knew he would look bad, but seeing him still shocked me. Luke wasn't walking. He was being pushed in a wheelchair by airport medical staff. He was emaciated. His clothes hung off his skeletal frame. A thick, unkempt beard covered his sunken, sunburned face. He looked like an old man, but what made everyone gasp was his right leg. It was heavily wrapped in bandages, from mid-thigh to ankle, stabilized with crude splints. The white bandages were stained an ugly, sickly yellow, and seeping through them was dark, dry, coagulated blood. It didn't look like a wound. It looked like a piece of rotting meat. It smelled like death. Luke. "Oh my God, my baby!" Barbara shrieked. She pushed past security and collapsed next to the wheelchair, hugging him. "Your leg! What happened to your leg?" The terminal erupted into chaos. Crying, shouting, friends asking a million questions. George rushed over, patting his son on the shoulder, trying to stay strong, but his eyes were red and wet. I stayed in my corner, completely disconnected from the melodrama. I looked at Luke. He was crying, burying his face in his mother's shoulder. I wondered if a single one of those tears was for the wife he had abandoned, or if he was just crying for his necrotic leg. Then the crowd parted slightly. Walking right next to Luke's wheelchair wasn't a paramedic or an embassy official. It was a woman. Diana was right by his side, claiming her place as if it were a birthright. She looked tired, her skin tanned by the desert sun, wearing rugged cargo pants and a tactical vest. But she was perfectly intact, not a single scratch. She wasn't in a wheelchair. She was standing on her own 2 feet, resting a comforting hand on Luke's back. A wave of nausea hit me. So that was it. The missing person report had been a scare. My husband abandoned his laboring wife, took 40 grand in cash, and flew to a war zone to act as a personal bodyguard for his ex. And what did he get in return? A bullet in the leg that was now rotting on his body. Was that the price of true love? He traded his leg, his parents' 100 grand, and 50 grand of his wife's money to guarantee her safety. I felt pity for him and, at the same time, a profound disgust. Barbara, after finishing lamenting over the leg, noticed Diana. She looked confused for a second, then overwhelmingly grateful. She took Diana's hands. You're Diana. Thank you. Thank you for staying by his side. Diana smiled, a tired but martyred smile. Of course, Mrs. Carter. Luke got hurt trying to get me to the extraction point. I owe him my life. Owe him her life. I laughed internally. The perfect narrative of the hero saving the damsel. The only detail was that my daughter and his family were footing the bill. After her touching moment with the ex, Barbara remembered I existed. She turned around. Her grateful eyes instantly morphed into pure hatred as they landed on me. She pointed her finger at me, shouting loud enough for the whole terminal to hear. What are you standing there for? Your husband is back. Can't you see how badly he's hurt? You heartless bitch. All eyes locked onto me. The judgment was palpable. I didn't speak. I just looked at Luke. Hearing his mother scream, Luke slowly raised his head. He looked through the crowd. Finally, our eyes met. He froze. He looked at me with bloodshot, sunken, bulging eyes. He looked at me like I was an oasis in the desert, like I was his salvation. The crowd of friends parted, creating a path between us. Barbara and George stepped aside, glaring at me with hatred, waiting to see what I would do. They wanted to see me fall to my knees, cry over his wheelchair, and beg for forgiveness for being a bad wife. Diana took a step back, hiding slightly behind Luke's chair, watching me with a complex mix of guilt and calculation. Luke grabbed the wheels of his chair. With a painful effort, he pushed himself through the crowd toward me. The rubber wheels squeaked against the polished floor. He stopped right in front of me. He looked up at me, his face smeared with dirt and tears. He reached out a shaking, emaciated, unwashed hand to grab mine. Hannah. His voice broke into a sob. Hannah, I'm back. He squeezed my hand tightly. I kept my promise. He sobbed loudly, tears and snot running down his wild beard. I promised you I'd be back before. I came back to you, Hannah. He lowered his head, pressing his face against the back of my hand, crying like a child. I stood completely still. I stared at the messy crown of his head. I felt his hot, salty tears on my skin, but they didn't feel warm. They just felt dirty. He said he had kept his promise. What promise? The one he made 3 weeks ago while peeling my fingers off him as my amniotic fluid soaked the floor. He was trying to take credit. I look at the pathetic man in front of me. He had lost weight. He was hurt. But he hadn't changed. He didn't ask, "Where is the baby?" He didn't ask, "How was the delivery? Did it hurt?" He didn't even notice that my 39-week belly was gone. He didn't realize that I had gone through major surgery and faced death alone. In his mind, the story paused when he left, and resumed now with him returning as a tragic hero, expecting his wife to welcome him with open arms and forgiveness. He had completely erased my trauma and our daughter's existence from his narrative. The revulsion I had been holding back erupted. I violently ripped my hand out of his. Luke looked up, stunned, tears still streaming down his face. "Hannah, what?" I took the hand he had just cried on and deliberately, explicitly, wiped it against the skirt of my dress, as if I had just touched something contaminated. The terminal fell into absolute silence. No one breathed. Barbara's crying cut off. She stared with her mouth open. Luke's hand hung suspended in the air. He didn't understand. He thought I was throwing a petty tantrum. I looked him dead in his bloodshot eyes. "It's great that you're back," I said, projecting my voice clearly. "Now we can settle our business." I didn't wait for him to ask. I unzipped my bag. Barbara smirked. She probably thought I was going to pull out tissues to dry his tears, or a checkbook to pay his medical bills. I didn't pull out tissues. I pulled out a thin, stapled legal document. I took a step forward and dropped it directly onto Luke's lap, right on top of his bandaged, rotting, foul-smelling leg. "I have to get home to feed my daughter," I said, clear and articulate. "Sign it." Luke looked down. He stared at the papers. Two bold words at the top screamed at him and everyone else. "Divorce petition." The whole airport seemed to hold its breath. I heard Hassan gasp. I heard Barbara let out a strangled scream. You bitch!" Luke started to shake. He snapped his head up, his face whiter than the bandages. "Divorce? What are you saying, Hannah? You're joking, right?" "Joking." I offered a sub-zero smile. "I don't have time to joke with you. My daughter is waiting for her milk. Sign it quickly." "No," he suddenly screamed, his voice cracking. "I'm not signing. I'm not divorcing you, Hannah. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I came back. I came back to you." He lunged forward, trying to grab my hand again. I took a sharp step back. "Luke." I stared him down. "That night when my water broke, when I begged you not to go, you looked at your watch and pushed me away." I pointed to the divorce papers. "I told you. If you walked out that door, you would carry the consequences." I pointed at his necrotic leg. "That leg is your consequence." I pointed at a paralyzed Barbara and George. "The $100,000 debt your parents took on to save you is your consequence." I pointed back at the papers. "And this is your consequence." No, Hannah, please," Luke stammered in absolute desperation. Right at that moment, another voice chimed in. "Hannah, you're misunderstanding the situation." I turned. Diana had stepped forward, placing herself between Luke and me. Her face was pale, not from fear, but from righteous indignation, as if I were a crazy woman making a scene. "Hannah, you have it all wrong," she repeated with a tone dripping with fake sincerity. "Luke and I have absolutely nothing going on. He went there for work and to help with my extraction. I am incredibly grateful to him, but we are completely platonic." She was acting, playing the innocent victim of my irrational jealousy. Luke's friends murmured in agreement. "Yeah, Hannah, Diana is a journalist. She's doing important work. Don't be so paranoid. Barbara clung to that lifeline. She lunged forward, pointing at me. You see, everyone knows it's your dirty, jealous mind making things up. You're just jealous of Diana. So you're using this as an excuse to abandon my son. Selfish. A platonic misunderstanding. My last shred of patience snapped. I looked at Diana, the woman, lecturing me about platonic innocence. Misunderstanding. I let out a laugh, a sound infinitely more terrifying than a scream. You say I misunderstood? I reached back into my bag. This time, I didn't pull out a thin document. I pulled out a massive, thick stack of papers. The forensic accounting report Valerie had handed me. I didn't hand it over. I didn't toss it at Luke. I threw the entire stack directly into Diana's face. Smack. Dozens of printed pages exploded into the air. They fell like snow, landing on the glossy airport tiles on Luke's wheelchair on Barbara's shoes. The numbers, the wire transfers, the irrefutable proof. The crowd was stunned. Diana froze on the spot. I yelled. I couldn't hold back anymore. I screamed right in her face. Then what the hell is this? $150,000. I pointed at the papers scattered on the floor. For 7 years, my husband split the bills with me down to the last cent, so he could secretly transfer $150,000 to your fake charity. You called that a misunderstanding? I took a step forward, picked a sheet off the floor, and held it up in the air for everyone to see. A luxury condo in Miami, bought by your mother 3 years ago using exactly this money. You call that platonic. Absolute silence. Luke's friends, who had just been defending her, turned pale. Barbara's eyes looked like they were going to pop out of her skull. She had no idea. George looked like he was about to pass out. Luke looked at me, then at the bank statements. All the blood left his body. He knew. He knew that I knew everything. I locked my burning eyes back on Diana. She was shaking, truly shaking. That was my blood, my sweat, and my tears, I said, my voice hoarse from screaming. But every syllable was a hammer blow. That is marital property. That was money meant to buy formula and diapers for my daughter. I pointed a finger inches from her nose. Return the money. If you don't, tomorrow morning my lawyers will file federal fraud and embezzlement charges against you and your mother. I turned to Luke. Sign the papers. Sign them before I change my mind and add dissipation of assets to the lawsuit. I didn't wait for his answer. I didn't want to look at their faces for another second. I spun on my heels. My sheath dress flared with the movement. My heels clicked sharply against the floor, decisive and lethal. I walked away from that disaster, from the crippled husband, from the shameless mistress, from that disgusting family. I had to get home. My daughter Hope was waiting for her milk. I walked out of the airport, leaving behind a wake of destruction tears and stunned silence. The cool Seattle night air hit my face, but it couldn't cool the fire burning in my chest. I had just done something I never thought I was capable of doing. I confronted them, and I destroyed them. I got into an Uber and gave the address of my new apartment. I didn't cry on the ride home. My tears had completely dried up. They had run out on that cold operating table and on those lonely nights holding my newborn. Now there was only a bone-deep exhaustion and an iron determination. When I opened the door to my apartment, I was met with silence. I startled slightly. "Maria," I called out softly. My nanny hurried out of the bedroom, pressing a finger to her lips. "Shh, you're back. Hope just fell asleep. She's been very fussy today. She kept looking for you. I think she missed you." I nodded, a sting in my nose. I tiptoed to the bedroom where I had set up her crib. Hope was sleeping soundly, her chubby cheeks flushed, breathing evenly, smelling of baby lotion and milk. Her tiny lips moved as if she were dreaming about nursing. I stood there, watching her. That innocent, pure life. That was my world. That was the only thing that mattered. The airport scene replayed in my head in slow motion. Luke's ghostly face when the divorce papers landed in his lap. Barbara's shock. Diana's panic when I screamed the $150,000 figure. Did I feel vindicated? Did I feel the pleasure of revenge? No. I felt nothing but a terrifying emptiness. A 7-year marriage had ended in a cheap airport soap opera cold, bank statements, and a daughter who would never know her father. I felt sadness. Sadness for my daughter, and sadness for my own blind stupidity over the last 7 years. My phone buzzed. Valerie. Are you okay? Her voice was sharp, but concerned. I heard you blew up the arrivals terminal. News traveled fast. I managed a tired smile. I'm okay. I'm home with the baby. I just did what I had to do. Valerie sighed on the other end. Good. Good for you. Let them see they can't walk all over you. Now rest, recover. Leave the legal stuff to me. They'll reach out soon, especially after you drop the 150 grand bomb in front of everyone. I know. Thank you, Valerie. I hung up sitting next to the crib. I knew this wasn't the end. Luke wouldn't sign easily. Diana and her mother wouldn't hand over the money easily. The Carter family would undoubtedly harass me. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I reached out and touched Hope's tiny, clenched fist. She seemed to sense me and wrapped her fingers around mine. That little warmth gave me infinite strength. Hope, I whispered. We are going to fight. Mommy is going to get back everything that belongs to you. Down to the last cent, my life settled into a new orbit. An orbit made entirely of baby bottles, breast pumps, and Hope's innocent laughter. The small apartment always smelled of baby powder. It was an oasis of peace, completely isolated from the storm outside. I focused on healing nursing and finding myself again. Valerie handled the legal battlefield. Just as she predicted, Luke's side went completely silent. He didn't sign the papers, and Diana vanished as if the earth had swallowed her. Then Valerie called with a somber tone. Hannah, I have bad news. My heart sank. I took Hope into the bedroom and closed the door. What's wrong? It's about Luke. I have sources at the hospital, Valerie said. His leg is completely necrotic. The gunshot wound wasn't treated properly in the field. By the time he got back to Seattle, it was too late. He has antibiotic-resistant sepsis. Sepsis. The word sent a shiver down my spine. As much as I hated him, I understood what that meant. It means death, the doctor said. Valerie hesitated. They have to amputate immediately. It's the only way to save his life. Amputate. I went numb. I remembered him in the wheelchair, his bandaged leg reeking of death. I thanked Valerie and hung up. I sat on the floor next to a pile of baby clothes. I looked at my 2 healthy legs. I remembered the night my water broke. If I hadn't called 911 immediately, if I had hesitated, if I had bled out on the way to the hospital, the person fighting the Grim Reaper right now would have been me. He made a choice, and fate forced him to pay the price. A gruesome price. A few days later, I was rocking Hope for her afternoon nap. Just as she drifted off, the doorbell rang. Maria was on the balcony hanging clothes. I opened the door quietly. I thought it was an Amazon delivery, but when I opened the door, I froze. Barbara. It had only been 3 weeks since the airport, but the woman standing in front of me was unrecognizable. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She wore faded sweatpants and an old sweater. Her once perfectly dyed hair was completely white at the roots. She was hunched over, her eyes swollen and bruised from exhaustion. She looked like a broken homeless woman. My heart felt a brief, involuntary pang of pity, but it vanished instantly when I remembered what she had done to me. She was shivering in the hallway, holding a cheap plastic bag full of oranges. She didn't dare look me in the eye. Instead, she tried to peer into the apartment Hannah. Her voice was incredibly fragile. I didn't invite her in. I blocked the door with a rigid posture. "What do you want, Barbara?" She didn't get angry at my coldness. She just started to cry. A silent, pathetic, broken cry. "Hannah, please. Please save Luke again. Save him." This family only came to me when they needed a savior. "I'm not a surgeon," I replied dryly, "and I don't have a single cent of his money left. How am I supposed to save him?" "No, it's not money." She shook her head frantically, tears flying. "The doctors have to amputate above the knee tomorrow. If he doesn't have the surgery, he's going to die of sepsis." She choked on a sob. "But he won't sign the consent forms. He's screaming that he'd rather die than be an amputee. He says his life is over." I listened to her in silence. Rather die than be an amputee. It sounded exactly like Luke's arrogance and cowardice. "He says—" Barbara hesitated, looking at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "He says he wants to see you." And she looked toward the bedroom where Hope was sleeping. "He wants to see his daughter. Just once. He says if he can look at his daughter, he'll find the will to live. He'll sign the papers. If he doesn't sign, he'll die. Hannah, he's my only child." Suddenly, Barbara fell to her knees. Right there in the apartment hallway, she clasped her hands together in a pleading gesture. "I'm begging you. I know we hurt you, but be the bigger person. Bring Hope to the hospital. Let him see her. Give him a reason to live." I stood motionless. The woman who called me cold-blooded, the one who demanded I abandon my newborn, was on her knees at my feet, begging for her son's life. I looked down at her. I didn't help her up. "Get up, Barbara," I said with an absolute zero voice. "I'm not going." "Why?" She snapped her head up, desperate. "Just once. Are you that cruel? Do you want him to die?" "He's your daughter's father, first," I said slowly and clearly. "He is about to be my ex-husband. Second, he chose his path the night he walked out that door. And third," I looked her dead in the eye, "my daughter is barely 2 months old. She has no immune system. Hospitals are breeding grounds for diseases. Your son has an antibiotic-resistant blood infection. There is absolutely no way I am going to risk my daughter's life to be his reason to live just because he feels regretful now. You," she gasped, speechless, "I am not bringing the daughter he threw away to be a prop in his tragic redemption arc. I am not that forgiving." I took a step back to close the door. "Go back and tell him this. If he wants to live, let him sign the paper. If he wants to give up, that's his choice. I don't care." I shut the door in her face, ignoring the wailing and the pounding against the wood. The surgery happened. Valerie told me that Luke didn't die. He signed in the end. The fear of death overpowered his pride. He lived, but the price was losing his leg above the knee. The lawsuit for the $150,000 dragged on. Diana hired a high-powered defense attorney. Valerie brought me up to speed. They're arguing that the money was a voluntary charitable donation, not marital assets. And the Miami condo? They say her mother bought it with her life savings. A blatant lie. I'm tired of them, I told Valerie. Just follow the law. I want to focus on my daughter. One sunny afternoon, I was pushing Hope's stroller through the small park near our apartment. She loved being outside, giggling at the trees. Maria was walking beside us. I felt perfectly at peace when a familiar figure blocked our path. I looked up. My heart skipped a beat. Diana was standing a few feet away, but she looked ruined. The confident, radiant war correspondent from the airport was gone. She was emaciated. Her skin had a yellowish, sallow tint. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her expensive clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in days. "Hannah," she croaked. I instantly pulled the stroller back, placing myself between her and my daughter. Maria stepped forward defensively. "What do you want?" I said with a lethal voice. I thought she was coming to scream at me about the lawsuit, but I was wrong. She looked at the ground, wringing her hands. She bit her lip deeply, humiliated, but desperate. "Hannah, could you loan me some money?" I was stunned. I almost burst out laughing. The woman who had embezzled $150,000 from my marriage was asking me for a loan? It was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. "Excuse me?" I smirked. "Speak up. It's windy." Diana looked up, her face flushed. "I'm asking for a loan. Luke, he had the surgery, but the medical bills. The $100,000 his parents borrowed only covered the medical evacuation. The hospital is demanding the surgery and ICU costs up front. If we don't pay, they'll discharge him and send him to a substandard care facility." "Really?" I nodded mockingly. "And what does that have to do with me?" I thought. "You were his true love. He lost his leg saving you. You should be taking care of him." She choked. "I don't have any money." "You don't have any money?" I laughed out loud. "Where are the $150,000? Oh, I know. Sell the Miami condo." "Stop it!" she exploded, as if she had stepped on a landmine. "That money is tied up in investments. It's frozen. I can't liquidate it." "Oh, frozen," I nodded. "What a shame." "Hannah," she started to cry. "I know you hate me, but Luke is innocent. He got hurt because of me. I owe him. You're his wife. You can't let him suffer." "Let him suffer." I bent down to adjust Hope's blanket. Then I stood up and looked Diana right in the face. First, I am practically his ex-wife. Second, I don't save men who abandon me while I'm in labor. And third, I smiled a cruel smile. "Diana, you're an international journalist. You're smart. You have connections. Figure it out. Sell your mother's condo. My money is for my daughter's college fund." I pushed the stroller to walk past her. "Excuse me, the air here smells bad." I didn't look back. I heard her crying and cursing behind me, but I didn't care. My life returned to its oasis of peace, but I knew the storm wasn't over. A few days later, Valerie called with an exhausted voice. Hannah, Diana, and her mother vanished. I sent someone to the Miami address, and the neighbor said they packed up in the middle of the night. "Vanished?" I asked. "What about the lawsuit?" "We're moving forward, but it will take years," Valerie explained. Her mother granted power of attorney to a lawyer, insisting it was her life savings. They want to drag this out in court. It's going to be a brutal, multi-year legal war. I stayed silent. Years. I looked at Hope in my arms. She was almost 3 months old, cooing and smiling at me. I realized that what I needed right then wasn't money. $150,000 was a lot. It was my daughter's right, and I would fight for it. But what I needed most was peace. I couldn't raise my daughter in that toxic environment, always waiting for the next legal blow, waiting for the Carters to show up at my door. I had money from the sale of the Seattle condo. It was enough to live comfortably for years. I took a deep breath. "Valerie," I said firmly, "handle the lawsuit. I don't care how long it takes, but I'm leaving." "You're leaving?" "I'm taking Hope far away from Seattle. I need peace. Save this number. It's the only one I'll be using." I didn't go back to my hometown. My father was there. I chose a completely new place, a quiet mountain town in the Pacific Northwest, near the Cascades. Fresh air, pine trees, total anonymity. Maria agreed to come with us. She loved Hope. We packed a few bags and left without telling anyone. As the car drove away from the bustling city of Seattle, leaving behind the betrayal and the pain, I looked out the window. I felt no regret, only relief. I looked at Hope, sleeping in her car seat. "Hope," I smiled. "We're going to start over." A year passed in the blink of an eye. We rented a beautiful A-frame cabin hidden among the pines. Every morning, I woke up to the mist rolling over the mountains. The air was so pure, it felt like my lungs were finally detoxing from the smog of my past life. I was no longer Hannah the stressed accountant or Hannah the betrayed wife. I was just Hope's mom. Hope was 15 months old, toddling around the cabin on her unsteady little legs, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. I opened a small online artisanal bakery from my kitchen, selling sourdough bread and lemon tarts to local coffee shops and tourists. It didn't make me rich, but it made me happy. True happiness, I realized, was simply watching my daughter grow up healthy and doing work I loved. Luke and his family had faded into the blurry memory of a past life. Until, one afternoon, while I was kneading dough, my phone rang. "Valerie." "Hannah, how are you?" "I'm doing great, Valerie. Hope babbles all day long." I smiled. "Do you have news?" "Yes." Valerie's tone shifted to professional. "The lawsuit for the 150 grand? We won." I stopped kneading. Diana and her mother couldn't prove the funds were theirs. The judge ruled that the Miami condo was bought with dissipated marital assets. I managed to get the property seized and liquidated. After legal fees, we recovered about $100,000. The rest was lost. Diana fled the country. $100,000. The number brought me no joy. It just felt like delayed justice. "Thank you, Valerie." "There's more," she said. "The divorce. Luke kept refusing to sign. But since you filed a contested divorce petition and he failed to appear at several hearings, the judge has scheduled a final mandatory settlement conference. If he doesn't show up, it will be a default judgment. But Hannah, you have to be there in person." I looked out the kitchen window at the pines. "Go back. You have to go," Valerie insisted gently. "End it. Sever the legal tie so you and Hope can truly be free." She was right. I owed Hope a clean, fresh start. That night, I dug out my old phone, the one I had turned off a year ago, to check for any legal notifications. When I plugged it in, thousands of notifications flooded the screen. I ignored them all, except for one text message that had come in just a week prior. "Unknown number. Hannah, I know you hate me. I know I have no right. But before the court date, please let me see you one last time. Just you and the baby. I'm begging you. Luke." I thought about it for a long time. Maria told me not to go. "Why reopen the wound?" she said. But Valerie advised me, "Go. Not to forgive, but to slam the door in his face so he never haunts you again. I replied to the message, 9 a.m. The coffee shop across from the courthouse. I didn't bring hope. I went to Seattle alone. I arrived early, sat at a corner table, and drank black coffee. I was calm. Now I held all the cards. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened. Valerie had told me he lost his leg, but the reality was still shocking. Luke didn't walk in. He hobbled in on crutches. One pant leg was pinned up at mid-thigh. He was skeletal, his hair completely gray, his face etched with deep, painful lines. He looked like a 60-year-old man. He struggled to pull out a chair and sat down heavily, leaning his crutches against the wall. We sat in silence. Hannah. His voice was weak and raspy. Thank you for coming. I nodded once. I'm not here to chat. He looked down at the table. His shoulders started to shake. He covered his face with his bony hands and cried. I was wrong, Hannah. God, I was so wrong. I am so sorry. He let it all out. Diana had abandoned him as soon as the money ran out and the hospital bills piled up. She took everything she could and fled. Her mother. Barbara had suffered a stroke from the stress and was now partially paralyzed. George had to sell everything, including his retirement accounts, to pay the medical debt. I lost everything, Hannah, he sobbed. I have nothing left. Please, can I see her? Can I see my daughter, just to know what she looks like? I looked at him, without anger, without pity. Just an emptiness. Luke, I said, my voice steady, you didn't lose everything. You threw it all away. You made a choice the night you left me on the floor. That leg, that debt, Diana abandoning you. All of that is the bill for your choices coming due. I stood up. And my daughter's name is Hope. She is not a tool to ease your guilty conscience. When she is 18, I will show her the video of how you left, and I will show her the bank statements. She will decide if she wants to meet you. Until then, stay away from us. I left a $5 bill on the table for the coffee. Sign the papers today at the courthouse. It's the only decent thing you have left to do. I walked out, leaving him weeping openly at the table. The court hearing was brief. It was held in a small, quiet room with the judge Valerie, me, and Luke, who arrived with a public defender. The judge reviewed the evidence, the video, the financial fraud, the abandonment. She looked at Luke with barely disguised contempt. Mr. Peterson, the judge asked, do you accept the divorce, the waiver of marital assets as outlined, and the granting of full sole custody to Miss Hannah with no visitation rights? Luke looked at me with a long, dead stare. I accept, he whispered. The gavel fell. Officially, we were nothing to each other anymore. I walked out of the courthouse with Valerie. The Seattle sun was shining unexpectedly warm and bright. I took a deep breath. I felt a massive, crushing weight lift off my chest. A weight I had carried from childhood through my marriage, right up to this very moment. Thank you, Valerie, I smiled. Don't thank me, she replied with a smile. You saved yourself. Now go home to your daughter. I went straight to the airport, back to the mountains, back to my artisanal bakery, back to Hope. Later, Valerie told me that Luke moved back to his father's hometown, living in a cheap rental, relying on disability checks and a neighbor who took pity on him to help care for his paralyzed mother. Diana disappeared forever, running from the fraud charges. My father tried calling a few more times, but I changed my number again. Some bridges are meant to burn. Years later, On a beautiful autumn afternoon, Hope was a lively, bright 4-year-old running through our mountain garden. She was chasing a butterfly. Her laughter echoed through the pines. "Mommy, look!" she yelled, running to hug my legs. I picked her up and kissed her soft cheeks. The wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and fresh sourdough from the kitchen. I used to hate Luke. I used to want revenge. But looking at my daughter, I understood that hatred was just a poison you drink yourself. Him abandoning me the night I went into labor was the greatest tragedy of my life. But, ironically, it was also my greatest salvation. I lost a terrible husband, but I found my own strength, and most importantly, I gained hope for myself. That was my victory. Dear listeners, when the seeds of betrayal are sown, the harvest is always bitter. Money reveals the true nature of people and destroys those who worship it above all else. But more than that, this story proves that financial independence, strength, and the courage to walk away are the keys for a woman to control her own destiny. Life can push us to the edge, but letting go of hatred isn't for the sake of those who wronged us. It's to save our own soul. The true power of moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live a quiet, happy life for ourselves and our children. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video to spread its valuable message. The channel thanks you, and we'll see you in the next one.